we're here for a very special episode of the Eat and Drink Real Estate Podcast, and that is the very first episode in a series of episodes focusing on veterans and military members.
Oh, yeah.
Our special guest today is David Piatek,
Thank you, Mitch.
who's been a lender for how many years?
I think it's been 18 years.
And you just made a big transition to a new company.
Yep, to Allied First Bank.
Okay, and how's that been going?
It's been awesome. Yeah, so I made the transition about 2 months ago just because, I wanted to give more availability to military members because I lend in all 50 states, right? Mm-hmm. So they gave me the ability to be able to help folks across the country and then just offer a wide range of products because the VA home loan isn't just specific to like, oh, you can do this one thing. There's a lot of stuff you can do, and that's what we're going to cover today, right? Kind of like as we get into this.
Absolutely.
And Mitch, you're a veteran yourself, aren't you?
I am. It's where I got this great hair.
Thank you.
Air Force veteran of over 6 years. So I focused on chem bio, nuke,
awesome.
high-yield explosives, and mitigating emergencies, which obviously being in real estate kind of goes hand in hand. Less explosives, but everything's still on fire.
That's correct.
So that's what we're here to talk about as well, is how we take a lot of these problems, and since a lot of us are veterans that we're working with, we're solution-driven, which is, I think, one of the reasons you and I get along so well is we see problems everywhere, but they're always followed with solutions.
Right. And I think that's the big problem in the industry. And that's why, like 6 years ago, I switched my focus to primarily working with military members, just because I see the issues firsthand from my unit, soldiers I talk to, doing things in the industry, right? Being kind of that thought leader in that veteran space of like, how do we get people to get veteran contracts accepted, right? That's like a big issue.
Huge.
I mean, you went through that yourself, finding a place. I've dealt with that. Where they're like, oh, it's a VA offer. We're not going to accept this. Like,
especially in a competitive market.
Right. And that's where a lot of misconceptions exist in the community. And things like this educate and empower veterans to be able to actually educate the folks they're working with. Now, hopefully they don't have to do that, right? Because that's why we're a wealth of knowledge. Like, you have realtors that you work with. I have realtors that I work with that, sometimes they're veterans, sometimes they're not. But it's not like you have to be a veteran to help a veteran, right? It helps in understanding that journey of how do you get from point A to Z, right? And just kind of put all those pieces together. And like you said, every transaction is going to have some type of issue, like every single one. You may not even know about it if you're a consumer, but if your team is really good, they will mitigate those fires for you without you even knowing it. But then there's times where you're like very aware that there's an issue. And then how do you get to a solution, right? With most people, if you don't specialize in something, you would know. Like, I wouldn't go and say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and start laying concrete because, like, I know how to build a garage, right? No, I don't know how to do that. And even if I looked on YouTube, it might give me the wrong information. And that's like what we see a lot with the military community and, let's say, influencers within that space, because I watch a lot of their videos and I'm like, wait a second, that's actually incorrect. Like, this is what the VA allows to kind of do that.
Well, and just talking about that too with background, right?
Right.
So it's not just the way we go about solving issues. It's not just our backgrounds. It's a lot of jargon. It's the experiences we share.
Right.
So myself, I've been with Citywide for going on 8 years. Was still in the military for 3.5 of those years. And thankfully, I not only had a lot of support here to help me through my time away, but I also had, people like you. I remember one time I was actually in Cheyenne Mountain, and I could not actually physically have my phone or any outside computer with me, and thank God I had you, because I was actually able to communicate with the outside world.
Through our military emails.
Exactly.
Yes.
So tell us a bit about your military background, and then how you came to, go into all this VA housing education.
Yeah, so I've been in the military for 14 years and 4 months and a couple days now. So I originally came in, I was in the lending space from 2021. Market shifted right in 2008-9. I'm like, man, what am I going to do with my life? Which, looking back, I should have stayed in the lending business because I just love it, right? But at that time, I was like, man, what am I going to do? And so one of the big benefits of going into the military, school being paid for, right? And you just get exposed to a lot of benefits. And plus, my grandfather fought during the resistance during World War II, got shot through the head, bullet exited the front or through the back, exited the front, survived it, lived into the 70s. So I was kind of like, it was an opportunity to kind of pay homage to that and just kind of give back to that, right? With the military, because that's what the military does, is they help people and countries that are in need that they can't do it themselves, right? And that's kind of the sacrifice that we have, like during all the wars, to come in and help with that. So I originally came in as an infantryman, right? So it was 11 Bravo. That was a great, until my knees started hurting, my back started hurting. So kind of like, hey man, what am I going to do? And I was like, hey, I'm exiting the military. And of course, when you're like, I'm leaving, they're like, hey, look at this. They dingle something. And so I switched that to doing intel work, because I also speak Polish. So it kind of led into that opportunity, and then the current opportunity that I have right now. So it's in. So, but within all of that, right, still serving, and I'm going to continue and do all my 20 years if my body can take it, because jumping out of planes isn't exactly fun as it used to be. The ground doesn't get softer.
Well, it's the landing that's the issue.
Well, I mean, you can land well. I do not. I'm not one of those graceful fallers. I'm just like, I just hit the ground and I bounce a couple times. So if I see where I'm going. But anyway, so like 6 years ago, I was already back into the mortgage business. I got back in after college. I graduated later in life. But that's what you actually typically see with veterans. They go a little bit later in life, which I think is great, because you have more of that life experience to be able to translate what you learn at a school setting to like, hey, how does this actually apply in reality? Plus having the why, right? That's the issue I think a lot of folks lack, and even the best teachers can't give you experience. That's why in life you have to experience things yourself for them to you to like, oh, my parents were right about this, right? And you're like, damn it, like why didn't I listen initially? Well, that still happens today, so nothing's changed in that perspective. So yeah, so 6 years ago, that's when I switched companies, and they were very veteran focused, and they were veteran owned. And they're like, well, why don't you focus in the military space? And I'm like, man, that's actually a good idea, because you share that camaraderie with veterans, right? So that's why we met like 5 or 6 years ago, and that's where we kind of pulled together a lot of veteran resources. Were kind of they came to the top, because if you think of like the Vietnam era, like veterans didn't even want to say they're veterans, because they would just people would look down on that. That has shifted to now where people are proud to be veterans. Like, yes, I served, but you still face that issue where veterans don't self-identify. But that's besides the point. There's so many topics we can talk about around that, right? So then I was like, man, I started doing a lot of stuff with like the Veterans Association of Real Estate Professionals. I started doing a lot of stuff in the community around veterans, and continue to do so now, because I see the challenges that people face when they shouldn't. Right? That's like, and again, this goes back to looking at online information, looking at things, and I'm like, man, that's just not right. Like, you can actually do a lot of these things. It's just that veterans don't have a tool to be able to get educated, because they feel like a lot of our industry is they're a bunch of badgers, right? They're just like, hey, use the VA, or like use the VA loan, don't use the VA loan. We just want to use your business. Well, that's not how it should be. It should be, well, hey, Mitch, you want to use the VA home loan. This is how it works. Where are you at in life? Hey, man, that makes sense right now, but you should still know how it works, because at some point you're going to want to use that. And then early on in my career, doing these presentations in the military, man, my heart would be broken. Like, I would sit there and talk to families that thought that they didn't have their VA home loan anymore because it's been too long. There's a lot of myths around that, like, oh, I can only use it within the first 10 years. I can only use it once. And this isn't like, you have this same issue across the entire age spectrum of when people get out, right? I work with a lot of folks that are transitioning out of the military, did 30 years in, didn't know that they can do that. They're like, oh, I've been saving it to when we get out. I'm like, what is saving it for what? Oh, I was told I couldn't use it till this or that. And I'm like, that's insane. And then you have younger veterans that are in real estate that we talk to, and they're like, I can actually use it more than once. And I'm like, what is happening right now?
Well, and going back to that information, right? So you and I both shared similar experiences with a lot of veterans. There's something called the Transition Assistance Program.
I just went through it twice.
TAPS.
Yep.
So you have two options, and most of the time the people taking it are on their way out of the military. You and I took it because we had long tours and came back, and even on X amount of active duty days for Guard and Reservists, we have to do that.
Right.
When I was sitting in there, I had a DOD instructor telling me I can only use it once. And this is, the information regarding it to where, it might not actually make sense for you, And I'm sitting there going through this, and a lot of things are generalized because you're dealing with vets and members from other states. So you have to be somewhat general.
Right.
But regarding the home loan, it was just so wrong. Like, as a matter of fact, the information in a very binary way was incorrect. So the misinformation, it's not just online, on influencers, because God bless the military, it's the source.
Right.
So when we're talking about, correcting a lot of that information, which I see you do on YouTube, all forms of social media a lot, what are some of the main corrections, we'll call them, that you seem you need to make?
Like, do we have 6 hours to talk about this or what?
Well, so, cheers.
Cheers, Mitch.
We'll talk about, condense that maybe a little bit.
Yeah, and to your point about the TAPS program, and this is for a lot of people. One, I went through it twice, right when I came off of deployment, and then I did it again. And so the reason I did it again, which I don't know if you know this or not, you can go back to TAPS your entire life at any point in your life, and as many times and as many different bases as you would like. I did not know that.
That's travel plans.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So, like, I ETS'd out of Fort Bragg, came off deployment, and that was like super short. Wrong information was given out. They might call me now. And then I went through a different TAPS because I'm like, hey, let me just redo this, right? At more of like a established base, right? Like in a DC area. And same thing, I took it. I'm like, man, they gave out the wrong info. They just like skimmed over it, spent 5 minutes. The info they gave out was wrong. I corrected the instructor afterwards and said, look, this is the VA handbook. This is where it's wrong. And they're like, well, no, that's what we're told to say. I'm like, oh man, this is great.
Yeah.
So some of the common myths that veterans face, like we talked about, is that you can only use the VA home loan once. It's a life benefit. You can use it unlimited amount of times. The second one that we always get is that, I could only have one VA home loan at a time, and I have to sell this home. I have to refinance out of the VA home loan. Well, that's not true. You can actually have multiple VA home loans at a time. Now, this isn't a math class, and then we're not going to pull up a bunch of charts, but it's kind of confusing because a couple years ago, they changed the rules around. So they said that, well, if you are a veteran, and you don't have a VA home loan at the time that you're closing on a VA home loan, like let's say you have a VA home loan, you're selling it, you're going to sell and buy the same day, there's no limit on what you can buy as long as you're eligible and qualified. Eligibility is the time and service and character of discharge for you to be able to use the VA home loan.
Okay.
And where people get confused, unfortunately, there are times where veterans or military members think that they qualify for a VA home loan when they actually don't, because they don't meet the time in service.
Well, I actually got a letter stating when I was in the reserves that I qualified for it, and then the VA sent another letter saying that I didn't because they had messed up my orders, and because I was in the reserves, a lot of that information that's standard in active duty wasn't exactly across the board.
Right. And the other issue that comes about is that active duty, guard, and reserve have different criteria for meeting the eligibility requirement. But we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But just to kind of go back, there's no limit. So if you want to buy a $3 million 4-unit building in Chicago with no money down, you can do that as long as you're qualified, right? So qualification is you meet the credit income asset standards, right? Like, hey, do you have enough reserves? If you need reserves or not. Hey, what's your job history like? Hey, what's your credit score? Because you still have to meet that. Like, yes, the VA home loan is a God-given right, but you still also have to meet those requirements per whatever lenders have, because the VA home loan is pretty loose on that.
Well, as far as that goes, this is for veterans, those who served, honorably discharged.
Well, if it's on active duty, I'll kind of go through it. So if you're on active duty and you serve 90 days during wartime or 180 days during peacetime, you're already eligible for a VA home loan. So you can still be in the military, and then, hey, I did 3 months or 6 months in, you already qualify. But a lot of people don't, right? Either you're private, you're a specialist, or you're coming in as a first lieutenant. Well, then most people don't buy that because they kind of figure out where they go. But after a couple of years, they kind of want to figure out where they want to be. The other requirement, if you're a veteran, is that you have to have served 2 years on active duty and then been discharged with an honorable or a general discharge. If you served in the National Guard, you have to have 6 years of National Guard, just M-Day and annual training, right? Not including deployments, because that already supersedes that. Or if you're on active duty, that supersedes that. Then you do 6 years, and then you can use your VA home loan. But now the important part to know is that if you skipped some drills, skipped an annual training, all of a sudden you did 6 years, but you don't have enough points to get a VA home loan.
So for the new reservists and new Guard members who might be listening to this, we often call those good years, right?
Yes.
So a good year is a year where we get all the points that we are supposed to get. And most of the time, depending on how many TDYs and stuff like that you do,
Correct.
you're probably over that good point. And I think you can miss 1 or 2 drill weekends and still be okay with the points.
I'm not sure on that.
But essentially, you'd have to check with your point system, which for every branch is a little bit different, and make sure that they're good. But once you do that, then the VA says what?
Now you're eligible for the VA home loan. Now with National Guard and Reserve members, you must have an honorable discharge. You cannot have a general one.
Oh, okay.
You must have. Yeah, I was reading again the guidelines, and so that's a requirement.
Yeah.
And then the other year, they came out with a new requirement. They came out with something nice for National Guard members because they were deploying a lot for... So, orders... in traditionally, if you're entitled 10 orders and you do 90 days or more on those Title 10 orders, if you're in the National Guard, you automatically qualify for those benefits. Now, that doesn't include training. So, let's say you joined, you finished your training, you spent 6 months, you came back, and you went automatically on a 6-month deployment. Well, by the time you come back from the deployment, you're already eligible, even though you're in the National Guard and you've only served a year. You're already qualified for that. Now, the new rule that they came out with a couple years ago is that if you served on Title 32 orders, depending on the type of orders you were on, if you served a total of 90 cumulative days, and out of those 90 cumulative days, you served 30 continuous days on active duty, so 30 days on Title 32 orders, plus another 60 days bunched together, then you would also qualify for the VA home loan. Now, why they did that is because a lot of National Guard members were going on COVID deployments stateside, and then the riot control. So then those were included. And it's like Title 32, 502. There's like a couple different title orders that you come on. Like I'm going on orders here coming up in 3 weeks, and they're Title 32 that meets that requirement. So then I'd actually use that whole consecutive 30 months towards that. Now I already qualify for the VA home loan. But the thing is, this is also retroactive. So veterans that got out of the service, they're like, oh man, I only served 4 years, but I did all these missions and whatever you may have, then you can actually go back and get your benefits. But you really have to talk with someone that knows what they're doing on that, because I had one come up 2 years ago. I'll never forget it, because the guy went to 5 lenders and they're like, you can't do this. The VA said no. And I'm like, that's incorrect. Like, let me look at this. I called the VA. They walked me through what they needed. We got what they wanted from the commanding officer, and we made it happen. But that's where it helps understanding the lingo to be able to then walk them through them. Plus, the VA Regional Loan Center is actually really good at getting back to you. Like, I think, I can say a lot of things about other entities, government entities, but I'll tell you that the regional loan centers are I would say, the best at getting back to you and answering your questions. But people don't realize you can just call them. And so, that's kind of crazy. So, so you have that entitlement piece that you have to be able to qualify. That's your, hey, I'm eligible for the VA home loan, and then the qualification piece also, right? You have to have a job. Like, you have to be able to pay for a mortgage. You can't just get one just for that, right? So that's like one of the myths around it. Another one is that, for active duty individuals, they can actually purchase a property and not live in it, right? So the VA home loan is designed to be a primary residence. Like, you intend to occupy that property within a 60-day window is considered to be, that's fine. If it's within 60 days to a year, you have to get an exception. But if it's more than a year out, then the VA won't approve it. And situations like that might just be arise like, hey, I'm moving somewhere, but I'm not going to move there for another 3 months. But you can buy, do a rent back, and then move to the property, right? As long as you can afford it to hold the payments, it's what you have, the VA will allow it. But for active duty service members, if their spouse or dependent is living in that property, then you can buy it without the veteran moving to it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So
and
if
they
you're
don't
on
give
a
you
deployment,
a period. Yep.
if you're
Stationed
PCSing,
overseas, then you can buy for your family. So even if we've had this happen where we had someone at Fort Benning, Georgia, they're stationed there, they're not moving, but their spouse is moving to Chicago. They took a job as like a nurse. Then the veteran was actually use their VA home loan to purchase a property for their spouse to live in, and they didn't have to move into it. But that's the only exception to that.
Okay. And
So
then
it's-
you mentioned that you can have more than one VA home loan at a time. So we're talking about PCS changes, from different bases, deployments, things like that. Well, a lot of my friends, they'd been PCSed at a certain base for 3-4 years. They're getting orders to relocate. If they already have a VA loan, do they have to sell that home, or
No.
can they still keep it?
So this is all a lot of this stuff too, we're kind of talking in general, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times everyone's situation is going to be specific to them because let's say they want to buy it in another place and they want to buy like an $800,000 property. Well, they already have a $500,000 property. Well, at that point, depending on where they're moving to, they would have exhausted their benefits, and then now they would have to put a down payment down, right? So if that would be the case and they're like, well, we don't want to do that, well, then it might make sense to sell their property. Now, other people think that they could just refinance their VA home loan into another loan product and free up their VA home loan benefits. That's half true because your entitlement is locked into your property. So even if you paid off your home to zero, your benefits will still be locked into that property based on the original amount you took out on it. You would have to do a one-time restoration, which would then free up your VA home loan to purchase another property with your full benefits. But once you buy that second property with your restoration, you would have to sell both properties in order to use your VA home loan again. So there's all these small nuances that people don't realize. Now, if you paid off the home and sold it to an LLC, like you owned it, okay, well, you've sold it, right?
Yeah.
But then you have to pay taxes on that. There's a whole process to that. But yeah, you could definitely take a primary residence and turn it into an investment property. There's technically no time limit on that. We'll have people that buy a home and 2 months later, it's like, hey, I got a PCS somewhere else, or I need to deploy. Can I rent my home out? Is there anything? Do I have to refinance it or something? I'm like, no, you don't. You just leave it the way it is. Especially today, where you have people that refinance and bought homes a couple years ago. They got 2.25% interest rates, 2.75. Why would you leave that? Now, those properties are going to cash flow. But again, everyone's situation is different. Some people might look at it and go, well, I don't care about that. I need my benefits. I don't have money to put down, and we want to buy where we're going because we're going to stay there. All right, well, that's up to each individual to decide that, right? But there's options to that. Now, if you don't do a one-time restoration, you can keep using your VA home loan, but at some point, you're going to be doing 25% down payments. And someone, I just thought of a question I get often. I have 20% to put down. Why would I use a VA home loan? Well, there's a lot of benefits, right? There's no private mortgage insurance. Well, hey, I'm putting 20% down. Why does that make a difference? Okay, well, that's a valid point. If there's a funding fee, right, because the VA charges a VA funding fee in order to use the VA home loan, unless you have a service-connected disability or you're on active duty and you have a Purple Heart. Then you won't get charged the VA funding fee. So literally the loan could be free. Otherwise, they'll charge you a certain percentage, which recently, as of April 7th of this year, 2023, they dropped them 15 basis points. So 0.15 they dropped, right? So now it's much lower. I think, don't quote me, it's like 1.25% if you put 10% or more down. But
they did add some things to it,
they
right?
they made it cheaper. But then even with that being said, the VA home loan, one, the rate's going to be lower. So it will make up for that funding fee. The payment will still be lower. Remember, you're writing off the interest too. I'm not an accountant. Don't quote me. Right up to $1 million, you can write off interest and taxes. So I have an account. So those are things to keep in mind. But the rate will still be lower, and then the qualification standards are much looser. So if you own a property that's not a VA home loan, you're buying a property with a VA home loan, you can actually offset the entire mortgage payment without a rental lease by getting a CMA, a competitive market analysis from a realtor to say, hey, this market is a strong rental market. Just like that, we can offset it. And then you can go buy another property. But and then the VA doesn't look at debt to income ratios necessarily. They look at what's residual income. They actually look at your net income with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, going back to one of the points you made earlier, and piggybacking off this, so as military members, we get our information from a lot of different places. From other military members, which only 50% of that is accurate.
It's like the private news network. It's like, I wouldn't even say 50%, Mitch. Like, don't even get that much credit, because I do presentations all the time for active duty. And then by the time we're done, they're like, majority of the information we know is actually incorrect.
But my buddy Steve, who's over at Bagram right now, he told me, no, you just got to do X, Y, and Z. You'll be all right. Well, so with that, then we've got the DOD giving information that takes an act of Congress to correct. And then, we have other lenders and other institutions and influencers online giving, inaccurate or misleading information. In regards to those who have questions, what about you? Are you licensed across the country? Can we contact you, ask you questions?
Yep. So I'm licensed in all 50 states. And I can help out and answer questions no matter where you are. Even if you're in the middle of a transaction, we do a lot of that, right? Yeah. Like, I'm not even helping I just had that call 15 minutes before we got on this, where someone's like, well, my lender told me this, and this is what's happening. I'm like, that's inaccurate. Let me send you an email. I pulled all the information, sent it to them. They replied back to me and CC'd their lender and said, hey, look, David said you can do this. Here's all the documentation you need. And they're like, oh, okay, we're going to take this to our underwriting team. And I'm like, this is insane. But this is what veterans face. So if they don't even have an outlet to go to, right? That's what we provide. Like, hey, just bounce an idea off us. We're not in the business to sell. We're in the business of education. And you make that decision.
Absolutely. And you and I have done a lot of education on VA housing and ancillary VA benefits. We've been going to VFWs, American Legions for quite a few years now.
Yeah.
And, again, the information and the feedback we get is always, I wish someone had told me this information 10 years ago.
Trust me, I'm in that same boat. And I'll tell you why that information that people give out is inaccurate. And I've learned that recently. Mm-hmm. So I had a video I did on VA condos, right? And I said, hey, listen, you can buy any condo you want. We can get a waiver done. It's the easiest thing. But what's the one thing that people always come back to you and realtors tell you? That's impossible.
It's not approved.
They say it's impossible. It's unapproved. It's going to get denied. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, shit. I'm like, where are they getting this information, right? So I had a client call me. It was 3 weeks ago on a Sunday. I said, hey, David, I watched your video. I'm like, thanks for the call back. Because, you think some of these people on like YouTube be like, why are they going to call me back or not? But I'm like, I'll call you back. Called them back and he said, well, the VA just denied my condo. I said, what's the name of the condo? I'm going to look it up on the VA's website. Pull it up, and I'm like, hey, I'm not seeing that it was denied or approved. I'm not seeing it was even submitted. But he's like, but my lender sent me a documentation that it's been denied. I'm like, well, that's interesting because, again, they will post it right away. They're pretty fast about it. And so he sent me an email with what the lender told them. And what the lender told them is because they had an internal overlay, which doesn't make sense because it's the VA that approves it. They said that, there's too many rental units in the building. But that's not a VA requirement. That's not even in their handbook. And this is all public information in the VA handbook. And so he sent me the email and like, no kidding, man. Right there it said too many condo units in the building, but that wasn't from the VA, it was from the lender. So lenders have overlays to what the VA says. So they'll come out and say, well, you can't do this, you can't do that. And I'm like, yes, you can. You're just not working with the right people. And that's why veterans are like, well, the VA denied me. No. The lender denied you. The VA does not. The regular purchases and refis, the VA does not do. They will do specially adapted housing. They'll do like when you go on sovereign land, like Indian reservations. Lenders can't do those types of loans. The VA will then step in. So it's not the VA that denies you; it's the lender that denies you. Now, some situations might warrant that, like, hey, it's going to be really hard to get approved because the VA doesn't have a minimum credit score. Did you know that? They don't have one.
Really?
They have none. But who would lend if you have a 400 credit score?
Would you?
No. Just imagine if you pull your own wallet out and say, hey, Mitch, I haven't paid any of my bills on time. I'm behind on all my bills, but I'm going to pay my mortgage.
I promise.
I promise, right? So that's why, there's two parts to that, right? Saying that you're going to promise is one thing. That's why there's what's called an automated underwriting system. Lenders will say, hey, give me all your information. Yeah, everything looks good. We plug it into the system and it comes back and says, yep, you're good to go. Okay, that's an easy one. But the VA also realizes that veterans have life events, right? You might be deployed. You might not be able to, your auto pay gets cut off. Hey, you're in the middle of Iraq. Okay, I can't just like pick up the phone or Snapchat them and be like, hey guys, I'm having issues with my account.
You should have.
You should have, right? And so you don't. So the VA allows for what's called manual underwrites, where an actual person will look at it and go like, hey, this situation made sense. They had these clustered events that happened, but they all match up with what they said, and they provided documents. Because like we work with lenders that go down to 500 credit score. Now, it's tougher when you go that low because there's normally events that happen that you have to meet certain criteria to basically be able to qualify for those things, right? So like that's one of the things that you have to be aware of. But like that's one of the misconceptions too, is that people think, well, it's a 660 credit score. My debt to income can't be over this. No, that's because the lender has an overlay. They can't do that. They said. And then same thing with the loan limits. They'll be like, well, they said that this is the max. In today's world of information, the World Wide Web, which I feel makes people less smart than they was intended to.
It's all true.
It's all true. Then they're just like, well, this is what they say. This is what it is. But you have to hear it from the horse's mouth, right? So that's why I do what I do in my space. And that's why I also created VA Housing Education, which is like basically, hey, we're an education company, so you don't have to feel like someone's going to reach out to you to ask you a question. So you sign up, you can take free classes about VA home loans, credit, how does my tax benefits work if I have a VA disability. Because like one of the big things for Illinois, right, if you have a 60 or 70% or higher disability rating, your property taxes get waived up to a certain dollar amount.
And that's assessed value, or is that the actual property value?
No, it's the assessed value. That's a great point, because people be like, well, I'm buying a $500,000 home that says 250 or something. And I'm like, well, that's not what the assessed value is. You have an equalizer, then it gets adjusted. Cook County is the only county where the second installment gets adjusted. So I think when's the second installment in Cook County?
I haven't checked Zillow for what Cook
County
says.
Yeah, don't check Zillow, please.
And they do have the second one, and then the rest of the Collier counties.
First installment.
One check is one
first installment.
One bill, and then the first installment is what goes.
Yeah.
Well, going off of what you were saying, so there's no minimum credit score for the VA loan, but different lenders will have different minimums and overlays.
Yeah.
And an overlay for those not in the industry is...
An overlay is where the VA allows for something, but a lender says that risk is too great for them to be able to undertake, right? So it's like same thing with like credit scores is an easy one. Yeah, VA doesn't allow it, but they might look and go, well, it's too risky for us to do anything under 600 credit score, so we're not going to do those, because they have to sell those mortgages off in the secondary market. All mortgages are sold in the secondary market. So no matter how much, the VA guarantees 25% of the loan. That's why you have better rates. That's why they're much looser, because it's technically like they're giving you a 25% down payment. So if you were to default on the loan, the lender would make their money back. This is why it's also attractive for lending institutions to do those. But you also have to know how those programs work, because you and I have dealt with a lot of people that are like, oh, I know VA loans. Like, I do them. And they're like, they've never done one. And their cousin Bobby did a VA loan 2 years ago. And they're like, oh, yeah, we know how to do them. And this is something that's repeated all the time, because people are badgers. They want your business, but they don't understand your business, right? They should be earning your business by providing you information, right? And you make that educated decision. It's like same thing with interest rates. Veterans think like, oh, I have this interest rate. I'm like, well, that kind of seems too low. If it's too good to be true, like anything in life, Mitch, it's too good to be true.
Okay, well, hang on, though.
I won't.
Okay. They said all I need is what they wrote on the bar napkin, and that's my interest rate. Is that the same as a pre-approval or being, there's another term?
Well, if someone goes through a pre-approval process, which is, I think we'll cover that like in its whole in a second, but when you get pre-approved, they can tell you what the rate is, but if they don't provide you how that rate is structured, that's where a lot of veterans are a pitfall, right? I'm a big advocate for military members, but VA home loans in general are the highest. You pay the most amount of fees out of any loan product in the country to use a VA home loan if you're working with the big veteran-friendly banks. because they charge you 1% origination fee and 2 discount points to get you these shiny interest rates when you really, and man, I've seen people wipe out their entire savings, everything they have, and I'm like, we could have done that without any fees and gotten you the same rate. It's because the lenders have different margins, and again, when they're like marketing to you every day and you're looking online and they have some great actors, which are funny.
There was a Ranger in that commercial.
There was,
okay?
yes,
and
yes.
I needed to buy a home right afterwards because Rangers lead the way.
I understand.
Shout out to my Ranger friends. That's a great question, though.
Right.
Then, regarding credit scores and using your VA loan and everything like that, a lot of service members, as we know, do not have great credit. And it just unfortunately is a part of something that in the military, I hope we can start to turn around for our service members, especially enlisted. God bless women with certain occupations and pick up trucks and Mustangs at 24% interest off base. But with all that being said, let's say we start to get that back on track and we're moving forward. Is there a way for us to shop around for lenders without it hurting the credit score that we worked so hard to build back up?
So you have a 45-day grace period from the time your credit is inquiry for you to be able to shop mortgages, and it'll count as one inquiry at the end of those 45 days.
That's a hard inquiry, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, most lenders are going to do a hard inquiry because they need to see and run it through their system to see if you get an approval or not, right? That's kind of the important part. So when you're going through that, and so with getting those rates, you really have to submit all your information. If a lender's not asking for your pay stubs, your bank statements, those are all red flags. If they're not requesting your certificate of eligibility, red flag. Because again, you might not qualify even though your eligibility, even though you think you do. And I get these calls all the time. So this isn't like I'm making it up, right? We get these. So you when you shop them, they're not going to send you what's called a loan estimate because you need a property address to get a loan estimate. But what they can send you is a fee itemization. So outline all the fees. And remember, when you're shopping for a lender, the only fees you should look at is your origination fees and discount points. That's the only two things you would look at, no matter how much of a difference in closing costs you have on a purchase, because as we know, in a purchase transaction, all the third-party fees will be the exact same no matter what at the end of the day. So even if you had 3 quotes, $10,000, $20,000, and $30,000 in closing costs, and nobody charged an origination fee, all 3 of them would be the exact same number at the time of closing. The only thing that changes is the origination and discount points. Because if they charge you that's how you would compare the rate. I know that the APR is like how people compare things, but it's just, unfortunately, I don't think that's the way you should compare it on a purchase. On a refi, yes, because then it's accurate. But on a purchase, you wouldn't. You just look at origination fee, discount points, what am I being charged, what's the rate? And then ask your lender, like for us, for example, we don't charge a penny. Not an origination fee and not a discount point. Nothing. It's a free loan. You have to pay like credit report fee, appraisal fee, but I'm saying lender fees. There are none.
Oh, wow.
So we give people the option to say, well, look, we're not charging you a fee. Hey, for $1,500, you can get a 0.5% lower interest rate. Would you want to do that? Well, duh.
Yeah, especially if I'm going to be there for a while.
Even if it, as long as they're for more than 4 years, it's going to make sense. And so does that make sense, right? So those are the things that people need to factor in when they're going through that process to see, is my lender looking out for my best interest with those pre-approvals, and they're reviewing everything? Because you can't even order an appraisal without you getting at least ordering the certificate of eligibility. That's one. And then with condos, you can't even order the appraisal technically until the condo is VA approved, which we don't do that. We actually order it before that, because in those situations, we'll pay for the appraisal, so there's no undue hardship for the veteran in the event it gets denied. But even if it gets denied, you can submit a waiver. So that's how we not go around it. It's basically how we mitigate that risk, because that's what the VA doesn't want to happen to veterans, is for them to get charged fees but then not be able to do the very thing that they want to do.
So if I log on to one of those banking institutions that I
Yes.
will not name out loud, but may or may not pay us a day earlier,
Yes.
and may provide insurance banking among
Yes,
other
yes.
tools, and advertise that they do home loans best. If I go and apply for a loan there for a home, and my interest rate seems higher than it should be, which more than likely it would be, then I could call you up the next day and have you run my credit and get me an accurate figure of what I'd be paying with you and your company. And if my buddy Nick over at another lending institution that I will not name says, hey, I'll give you a better rate, we can actually have him run the numbers too and shop for what would be best for our situation.
Right. So you could definitely do that.
45 days?
Yes.
Awesome.
And that's on the CFPB's website.
Well, I don't know about you, but I think this might be a good time to refresh.
I
and
agree.
Since I have you here, and David Piatek has had it a little bit too good in the Army,
I don't know about
I
that. Not in
bought-
the beginning. I put my time in.
I brought special treats for us
Oh,
to have.
yeah.
Okay, that I think now is the time. And just real quick, what do you have on the
I
menu for
have
tonight?
the beef taco filling. No, I don't remember eating these.
Is that what we call a repressed memory?
Yeah, maybe. Just like I put it down, deep down inside. What do you got?
Beef shredded in barbecue sauce.
I've never heard of that one either.
All right, this is what you do. Pop open this package.
You also need this.
Right there. Open the top. Tear the top off.
Yep.
Yep. All right, so you grab your little plastic. Gotta make sure that's open. Oh, they don't use them anymore. No, they do. Yeah. Look at that. All right, take your meal. What do you got there? Beef strips. I like it. Okay. We're gonna put it in the package.
Throw it in.
We're not gonna let it touch the bottom.
Okay.
Now I gotta heat up my rice too, bro. So I put it on the backside.
All right, now shake it up a little bit. Well, as we're waiting for our dinner to cook,
Yes.
with everything we're talking about right now, at the end of the day, half of it comes down to what's the market like.
Yeah.
I know a lot of this, for anyone listening, the market in San Antonio, Texas is obviously going to be a little bit different than the market here in Chicago.
Or anywhere.
Or anywhere.
Right.
But across the board, a lot of people are worried because all we hear on the news are very terrifying things about interest rates. We are looking at Zillow or Realtor.com or whatever, we have access to on
Right.
the civilian side. What are we looking for? And, as a veteran using a VA loan or an active service member, is this a good time to buy or should we be holding out and renting?
Mitch, that's a very loaded question that you just purposely asked.
Obviously.
So there's a lot of factors into this decision. If you're going to stay somewhere for a while and you're going to stay somewhere for a while, it could be a great option. Now I'll kind of go through some of those metrics. If you're in a certain school district and you want to be in that school district, renting could be tough because they can kick you out. They can keep increasing rents. So that's a major factor for a lot of people, right? Sometimes you have 3 kids, 2 dogs, and 3 cats. Can you find an apartment that can accommodate that? Most of the time, no. You're gonna have to buy a place. The flip side to it, like you said, media. The reason why they get so many click-throughs because they instill fear into people of this, right? And I'll tell you, people with money don't care. Even like people that can afford to buy a place, they don't care because they know that values continue to go up historically, right? It's not guaranteed. But even 2008, 2009, people are like, oh my God, this is the end of the world. And literally then I was telling people, like, just wait 7 years. All the bankruptcies fall off. All the short sales fall off. People will be buying again. And just like clockwork, it happened just like that. Right in 2014, 15, market bounced back. Things were good. People refinanced. So people are like, well, the rates are high. And if you can afford it, you're getting tax write-offs. Why wouldn't you buy a place? You can always refinance. And that's what people do as homeowners. seasoned homeowners know, like, let's say our seasoned homeowners are like, well, yeah, rates are high, but when they drop, which they should drop next year because it's an election year, and so they're going to try to make it enticing, and right now they're trying to halt the economy from going up too fast. But what happens when they get it to slow down too much? They have to re-energize it while lowering rates, and then people just refi. And with the VA home loan, you can do the interest rate reduction refinance loan, which is a super easy process. No appraisal, nothing. It's just a very easy loan to refinance into, refinance your home with. So, and in certain markets, values continue to go up. In some markets, they decline a little bit. And so that's more, a lot of people are like, well, the market's declining. Okay, I can't afford this anymore. Well, that falls on the veteran themselves to say, well, I'm not in the right financial position to become a homeowner. Because you have, great, you have no money down on the VA home loan, but you still have to pay closing costs, which on average are 2.5%, 3%. Now, if you're using the big banks, then you're talking about 5%. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a big difference, right? But again, that's why people get priced out of that. Or they're in the market, like we do a lot of seller credits to cover all closing costs. So we have veterans walking away from closing, making money.
That's beautiful.
It's more than beautiful because all closing costs can be paid for. Now, does it make sense in every market? No, some markets are just so hot they can't do that.
Yeah.
Now other markets, like here, we do a lot of them. We're like, well, hey, we need $10,000 in seller credits. Well, let's increase the price $10,000. You're paying a couple dollars a month more in mortgage, but then all that's covered for you, right? Everyone's situation is going to be different. So when people are like, well, the market's crashing, show me where. Show me where people are just not coming in doing cash purchases, 100,000 over asking price. We see that all the time. But again, everyone's market's going to be different no matter where you go to, right? Is holding out the right thing to do? That's what people are always saying, like 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and then they never bought a home. When rates are super low, they were 2.25%, people are like, well, I'm going to wait till the prices drop. But even if the prices dropped 100, actually half, Mitch, half, your payment would have still been lower than what the current market rates are at half.
And they're a little bit higher than they were in February of 2020.
Yeah. Right? So now they're at 7s. Rates then 2.25%. So smart people that looked at the numbers, like I talk to people, they're like, man, I'm looking at the numbers, even if the price drops half, I still walk away like a king because I can still make my mortgage payments. All of that's still good. That's why people were bidding 100,000 over asking price because it made financial sense to them. And then they drove up the price of their area regardless because there's closed transactions, right? So that's the thing people don't realize is like, yes, people drove up that market because a lot of people have money. It's not like the 2008, 2009, we could do ninja loans. Ninja loans, no income, no asset. Like you could literally have your credit pulled and you buying a house. That's it. That's why we had the market crash. We had these subprime mortgages, 13, 14% interest rates. So people are like, oh, rates are 7. That's crazy high. Because you live in an illusion. Like the rates were that low only for a short period of time, which ended up having a negative long-term effect because even if you don't like your home and you got a 2.25% interest rate, are you going to move to buy a home 100,000 more when your payment doubles?
No.
Right. So they've created in a way their own housing shortage by having, hey, sellers, you why would you sell when you got a low rate? You might as well just rent it, buy another place, offset the rental payment you get with your new mortgage to have an effective lower rate.
Well,
I know that was a lot, and like we need like charts and stuff, but like that's and I'm talking more of like from my industry, right? But
well, one of the things that popped up for me and my family during the pandemic was we bought a home, which was beautiful, went through the VA loan process. It was great. And because we were working with lenders like yourself that know exactly what they're doing, right, we didn't hit any of those huge hurdles. However, my beautiful wife had her beautiful parents not tell us that as soon as we bought the home, their plan was to move in with us.
Hopefully she's not watching this.
Well, I think she has stronger feelings about it than I do, quite frankly, because I love other people cooking for me, and they cook a ton of food.
I should come over.
So, absolutely. And the issue we ran into then is that we bought this beautiful home, but now all of a sudden the home that was perfect for my family has now just grown, and the home is a little bit too small for us.
Yeah.
So I looked, as you said, the market was really, really tough during that time. If I want to use my VA home loan, am I able to use it on a home that maybe needs work because the market's tough and that's all I can find? Or could I use it to make my house bigger and more suitable for the size of family I now have?
So, the VA loan, from a purchase perspective, you can purchase a property as, you purchase a property that's in good condition, you can do that. And you can also do renovation loans, right? And they have 2 tiers of renovation loans, up to $50,000 and an unlimited one. Now, that unlimited one obviously comes with some restrictions. You have to complete the work within a 4 to 6 month window, depending on the lender. And then, there's downsides because the rates could be a little bit higher. Fees are a little bit higher with those types of loans because they're higher risk loans, right? They have to keep coming back out, making sure everything is good to go. I know you went through that process. So you can definitely do a renovation loan with that. Now, most people think the property needs to be in perfect condition, and it doesn't. The VA publishes their minimum property requirements, MPRs, and then you can actually look those up to see what they are. But most of the time, it's gonna be peeling paint or something small. And what veterans don't realize is that you can buy a property as is because you can put up the money to do the repairs yourself after closing by getting a contractor's bid, and then you can actually do the work yourself, and you don't have to hire a contractor. So veterans lose out because they think oh, I can't buy a property as is. Yes, you can, but you're then responsible for setting up that money. So, in an escrow account. So let's say repairs are $1,000, you have to put in $1,500, which is 1.5 times the amount.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
So if we did that, and I made those repairs, would I then get that money back?
Yeah.
Well,
most people don't know that.
Well, a lot of the homes on the market right now, the ones that are perfect are, $50,000, $60,000, hundreds of $1,000s more than a lot of people can afford.
Right.
And the ones that aren't selling as quickly, maybe they need paint, maybe they need, a patched roof or a driveway repair.
Right. That'd be more of peeling paint. And another thing too is let's say there's a dilapidated shed on the property, or a dilapidated garage, or a dilapidated barn. Because a lot of veterans are buying these farm residents, which is fine. You can actually do that with the VA loan. Which leads me to, you can buy a single family home, a condo, a 2 to 4 unit property, and you can buy a farm.
I was going to ask, a farm?
You can buy a farm.
Like a real farm.
Yeah, but you can't use rental. You can't use, not rental. You can't use income from the farm in order to qualify for the loan. And the land will be excluded from the value of the property. So you have to be really careful with that.
Okay.
Yeah. You have to be, because there's no max acreage. So there's no you can't buy more than 5 acres. There is no rule. You can buy 100 acres, but at some point the value is worth more than the home, and then you start running into those issues, and that's a case-by-case basis.
Not that any veteran wants to move onto 100 acres.
I do. I was looking at that. I had someone reach out to me I have 125 acres. I want to build a house. Yes, you can. Which reminds me, you can do 100% construction loan.
A brand new, not built home?
Yep, including land acquisition and the construction costs. So it means you don't own the land, you don't have a house. You can get a loan to do the land acquisition and the construction loan at once.
Well, let me ask you this then about that. If we do that, we talked a lot about whether or not you can have more than one loan at a time, whether or not you have to live there, things like that. And, of course, affordability of the payment, which is number one. It's one of the most beautiful things about the VA loan. It's a fixed rate. So as long as you could afford it today and there's no drastic, issues in your life later on, you're just paying the increase in property taxes and you're not.
Right.
With that being said, if you do new construction and you acquire the land and build afterwards, do you have to float the payment for that home during the construction period?
Different lenders have it set up differently, but most of the time you're going to be paying interest only for the draws that you've taken out. So if you take, let's say you have $400,000 total loan, you do $100,000, you pay interest on that $100,000. Now you have $200,000, you pay interest on $200,000. Now you have $300,000, you pay interest for that, and then $400,000, and then by the time you're done, you refinance into a regular 30-year fixed mortgage.
VA loan?
Yeah.
That's beautiful, especially in today. We have limited listings on the market, which is a huge issue going on. But there is a lot of land being sold, depending on where you want to live and what your work allows. That's a huge option for veterans. And you're still getting all the VA benefits, typically a lower interest rate,
Yep.
lower payments and fees.
Now the catch to that is that it's not that. That's the catch. It's the you ever look at a house and you're like, man, you go with your spouse, you look at homes, you're like, man, this is perfect. And they're like, no, this is not. You're like, oh, here we go. So if you think that's tough, or doing a renovation is tough, try doing a new construction.
I wouldn't even tell my wife. I'd show her
That's
a picture of a
correct.
house. I'd say, does this look okay? Cool. I'd let her know in 6 months. We built a house. Time to move in. Nothing you could do about it. I'm sorry about that.
Mitch, that is the correct way to go about doing that, right? Because otherwise, you're gonna be like, it's just gonna be tough, right? Like it's just picking out the tile colors. You have to pick out the bathroom. You have to do a lot of that. Now, there's companies out there that do it. I'm not gonna mention company names because they charge a hefty premium. I know, I have some land in Asheville, North Carolina, and I met my neighbor, Army vet, and he used this company. I'm like, how much did you pay per square foot? I'm like, this is insane, right? So that's the one thing with these loans is that you're not doing a self-construction. You're not allowed to do a self-build, right?
So I couldn't be the general contractor and the architect. I would have to have VA approved.
And then you're paying market prices for all that, right? So that's kind of the tough part. For veterans that are like, well, I'm a crafty veteran. I know how to do this myself. I have experience. Then you would have to do like a regular, through like a credit union or something like that, because then you could do 20 or 25% down payment, and then you're allowed to be able to do that. Now, what veterans don't realize is that they're like, well, I don't have money. You actually do have, like a lot of people have like TSP accounts. So they have a ton of money in there. They can actually borrow against that TSP account if it's for the purposes of a primary residence without a penalty, and they just pay themselves back.
Well, I'm a civilian now, despite keeping my Air Force hair.
Looks great, by the way.
Thank you. Can I use, my 401k? Because now I'm in a corporate lifestyle. Can I use my 401k to go and do that?
Yes, you can.
Would I have to deal with those hefty tax penalties? Or?
Not if you're borrowing against your TSP.
Okay.
Only if you're doing a withdrawal.
If we're using it
Again,
for
I'm
the
not a
home and
financial
we're
advisor,
borrowing-
so talk to your financial advisor. That's my disclaimer. But to my knowledge, that's how it works.
Small text here.
Small text, please. Yeah.
Well, David, I do believe that our dinner has been
is ready.
recooked.
Let's try this.
What is your side there, Lily? What's the other package you have?
This is
No, the green package.
green. This one?
Oh. Does she have a side?
They gave me a bunch of stuff.
Did you read
What
it?
is that?
Wheat bread. Doesn't look like bread.
That
or
is
feel like bread.
fantastic. You should open that because that's one of my favorite
Oh, yeah.
things
I'm gonna
in
try
the
this.
MRE.
All yours.
No, you have to open this and actually try this.
Let's try this. Man, it's actually a lot better than I thought.
I mean, those look like real tortillas.
No, this. Whatever this
really?
is. Yeah, man, it's actually really good.
It's not bread.
Okay, stop reading. You're supposed to read the main line, not the details. But they must have changed these MREs for reals.
Well, I don't think they've got the same breakfast omelet that they used to have. I don't think they've got that.
But this is legit.
I think that they have changed some things up.
I'm not saying this is a Michelin star rating.
Well,
but
it's not one.
I'm just saying right now, I think my feelings have changed. I'm not saying that I'm going back to these. I kind of like the hotel stars.
So, we're talking about farms, which I'd love to own one. We're talking about condos and things like that. I had recently joined a online veteran, I suppose you'd call it, influencer group, okay?
Okay.
And they had done a seminar on VA home loans. And
They
I was
did.
like, all right,
Okay.
I'm going to learn some stuff, right?
Okay. Well, you know me, so you probably won't.
That is correct. I did not learn anything, except apparently I learned that I can never use a VA home loan to build wealth for my family.
Who said that?
An online influencer.
No.
Yes. Apparently, I am not allowed under any circumstances to use my VA home loan
As an
to
investment
build
vehicle.
wealth.
Is it because of you can't use it for an investment vehicle or to build wealth?
An investment vehicle.
Do you know why?
Why?
They say that? Because one, it's not true. Two, it's an FHA thing.
Okay.
And I did not know that until I did a class. I was doing a realtor class, and they're like, "Hey, can you do one on like FHA loans?" So sure, I'll do it. So I looked up all the guidelines, looked up everything, and I'm like, "No shit."
Really?
There it says. And they come with other restrictions like Airbnb and stuff like that, but VA loans have none of that. So that's a misconception. That is not true. You can use it as an investment vehicle. In the VA home loan in the handbook, it says that other part's gonna come out. And you got a dress shirt on. The in the VA home loan basically says it is your God-given right. So if you say you're gonna occupy that property and you test that you're gonna be living in it, that is the truth.
Now, you mentioned earlier something about apartment buildings. What type of properties? I mean, we mentioned farms, things like that. Am I able to buy multi-unit properties with my VA loan, or
Up to a 4-unit building as long as you occupy one of the units, and you can actually qualify for more because you can use rental income, proposed rental income, even if the units aren't rented out, to qualify for a VA home loan if you have 6 months of principal, interest, tax, and insurance in a reserve account. So 401ks would count, like 60% of a 401k will count towards the reserve. That's in the event like you can't rent your property out or something like that.
Yeah.
Then you have those 6 months. But what people don't realize too is that if you have a service-connected disability, you can also be exempt from a multi-unit if you meet certain parameters, like having short-term rentals. Then you can also qualify for that.
I have short-term memory?
I do too.
Does that count?
No.
Okay.
But if you have a TBI, it does.
Well, some of the biggest issues that I've seen going on is a lot of my friends coming out of the military have said, "Hey, man, I found this awesome realtor, awesome lender. They say they do VA loans all the time." And, cut to 30 days later. And that veteran and their family are just completely overstressed and have been going above and beyond, getting everything for these people. And through no fault of the seller on their deal, they're having a very unhappy experience closing on their first home. What if I'm coming out of the military, or let's say I'm in and it's my first home? What questions can I ask, or what can I do to at least prepare myself and have a good, baseline as far as good people who actually know what they're doing around me?
So there's a couple things to that, right? Remember when we started off? Sorry, the food is already starting to get to me. Yeah, I already have like acid indigestion. That wasn't a great mission. This is your idea. I got Pepto-Bismol in the car. It's okay though. So there's a couple things that go into that process, right? So I'll tell you that one, a lot of conversations I have with military members that are in that position where they're like, "Hey, I'm about to close and I find out that I can't do something." Just like that call that I got 15 minutes before, and like we started off our conversation to say, man, we deal with a lot of problems. And no matter what part of that you're in, like you always have problems. But the most important part when you're first going through the home buying process is your pre-approval. A majority of the issues come up because you didn't submit your documents or you didn't want to. Like, well, I'm going to submit them later. Well, it's your fault. The lender didn't ask you for them and you didn't know any better. Well, now that falls on the lender for not asking for all that stuff up front for them to make sure that you're actually qualified for the home loan, right? When people think of everyone that's out there, think of your own job and what you do. And someone tells you something, you're like, nah, that's incorrect, right? That's the same thing you got to think about when it comes to the lending side. To ask someone, how much did you personally close in VA home loans this year? Well, I haven't closed anything, but my cousin's friend's uncle did a mortgage for veteran, and it seemed to go well.
I Googled it.
I Googled that. Or they'll tell you, well, I haven't done them, but my office is very experienced in them. Well, how much did your office close? Oh, we closed X. Does that include your branch, or is that like nationwide? Because people like to fluff those numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And asking them basic questions like, do I need to pull my own COE, or do you guys pull it? They'll be like, what do you mean? What's a COE? Well, then you know. Certificate of eligibility is how you determine your eligibility for a VA home loan.
That's a red flag.
That's a red flag. Do you guys look at residual or DTI? They're like, what does that mean? Well, VA looks at residual income, not debt to income ratios. Do you have an overlay? It's these small things. Another thing you can easily ask, most veterans don't know this, and the majority of lenders do not, is that square footage counts against you for your residual income on a VA home loan.
What does that mean?
So let's say you have a 1,000 square foot home.
Mm-hmm.
The VA counts 14 cents per square foot. So if a lender doesn't ask you, well, what size home are you looking at? What's the average square footage of the homes? They don't ask you that. That's a red flag. They don't know VA home loans, because that $140, especially if you're tight, can disqualify you from the VA home loan. And most people don't know that. Or if you have children and they don't, and under the age of 12, they're not asking you, well, how much you pay in childcare expenses.
Mm-hmm.
Big red flag, because the VA loan is the only loan that counts childcare expenses against your income qualification. And so
Really?
if they're not asking you some of these like basic questions, you should know right away. And what's mind-blowing to me, as much as I love veterans, is sometimes they just don't, they're so fixated on the happiness that's about to come of being a homeowner. Sometimes they forget to ask some of the relevant questions to ensure that they're actually in good hands. Because remember, we're in the military, a lot of times people are like, well, this is how it is, this is how it is, this is what you're going to do. You just do it. But there's a lot of thinkers out there. And you should be like, well, man, based on what I do and some of the things I don't know, that's like when I do my presentations, my goal is not to answer your questions, because it's impossible. Like doing a general conversation, everyone has unique. They're all snowflakes. So everyone's situation, no matter how similar it may seem to somebody else's, is going to be unique to themselves. So we can only give you the general information that's out there to be able to empower you to be able to ask the right questions, right? Then you're able to then kind of navigate that system and see how people answer those questions. So when you asked the question earlier, when I'm shopping lenders and I'm shopping them, meaning rates and fees, that's an important part. But in that process, you should be also paying attention. And my background's in Intel too, so it's a kind of lens to it where I pay attention to what people say, how they say it, and what their intent is, right? Within that, how they say that. So you want to be able to see what information do they give you. Because I'll tell you, I'll talk to a lot of people, and a lot of times people will just be like, man, you've explained to me in 5 or 10 minutes more than anyone has explained to me over the last couple of months of me going through the pre-approval process, because you don't know what you don't know. And I used to always think that statement would be like, well, that's kind of a stupid statement. But it's true, because we're not in that business, right? Like I can't answer title questions because I'm not in title, right? We only know what we're exposed to.
You can't ask questions if you're not prepared for
them.
them.
You're not prepared for them. And it's not like it's your fault. Even if you do the research online, you're still going to come across those deficits where you're not going to be able to ask the right question. Like I recently, when he wanted to do a retaining wall, but like a big one against the mountainside, because when I built a house in North Carolina, and I couldn't even. I started the search process, but then I didn't know the terminology in order to get the references that I needed, right? And I kind of got frustrated by that. So then I just reached out to someone that knew that, hey, this is what they did in that area, and they kind of walked me through how that process works, what actually is involved with it, so I can go back, look it up myself, and then go back to them and say, like, yeah, you're right. Like, this is exactly what I want to do. I want to bring somebody on that knows what they're doing. Not saying like, oh, I can do it, and then they end up not.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the frustrating part for veterans, is that a lot of times they think that people have their best foot forward, that they have their best interest. They don't. Like when I tell clients, like, if you want to buy a home, I'm with you. And if you don't, let's cancel it. I don't care. You're going to find something eventually you like, and I'm there to help you, but we're not going to force you into something.
Well, they'll be unhappy, and
Right,
you
you're
know,
gonna-
I mean, unfortunately, that's going to ruin their future experiences.
Well, that's the thing, and a lot of people get that experience, and that's why sometimes people, like, I just had a recent client we're working with 2 years ago. They tried to go on their contract to buy a home, and the contract fell apart because the lender didn't ask for some documentation, and then they weren't able to qualify halfway through a transaction. And then I will tell you that my number one complaint from people, is you ask for too much.
What do you mean by that?
Because they're like, I just got pre-approved. I didn't have to provide any of those documents. And I said, well, if you want to fail, go ahead. I'm not giving you a pre-approval until we actually see all the documents. Like, we have to, because when the time comes and your deal's falling apart because I didn't ask you one simple question or this one document that easily you can provide, you're going to have issues.
You want to know up front.
Up front is the big thing. Up front is what you want to know. Everything, all the details, review the bank statements. Hey, we see some weird activity. What is this? Oh, I have a side job that I do this with. But I thought you told me you were just a W-2 employee. Well, no, I have this job. Well, do you claim that on your taxes? Because we didn't request your taxes because you told us that you didn't have a self-employment job. Well, I do. It's a side hobby. Well, what's your side hobby? Well, I'm in photos. I do marketing. How much money do you make a year? Well, actually, it's just an expense for me, so I expense like $12,000 a year on my taxes. Oh, interesting.
So on paper, you make a pack of menthol cigarettes
Right.
and $40
Right.
annually.
Right. So then it's you can make $60,000. Now we have to take that $12,000 out from your actual income. Well, it's not a real job, but it is because you file it on your taxes. Well, I don't have to tell that to the lender. Do you think lenders don't know? We have software systems that we run, and it'll pull if you file a company under your taxes, we can actually pull that information. And I've just seen people get burned by that because we'll ask people, do you have any self-employment income? Do you have anything? No, nothing. And then we end up halfway and they're like, you have a company. Well, yeah, but I just that was last year. I didn't do much with it, but you wrote off X amount of dollars. Well, yeah, but why does it affect me? I'm a W-2 employee. It's the small stuff. Oh, you have insufficient funds in your accounts for whatever reason, right? Accounts weren't linked. That's a red flag. That can cause you to get downgraded from an automated underwrite to a manual underwrite.
Which is going to affect interest rates,
fees, how long this is going to take. So this is why people have bad experiences. I'd say a lot of people have good experiences, but sometimes people that have good experiences don't know the fact that they got screwed with no lube.
My number one thing that I would tell any veteran, or for that matter, any prospective buyer,
Right.
is my number one thing is two things.
Number
One,
one thing is two things.
Make sure that you make all your payments that show up on your credit report on time,
Yeah.
no matter what. Next thing is be incredibly transparent and honest with your lender and your realtor. We will find out about everything you're trying to hide, no matter what you do. And it's only going to hurt you, cost you more money, cost you more time than had you been honest and forthcoming, right away.
Right.
I mean, bad credit, we can fix bad credit.
Oh, yeah.
Fine. Even missed payments. All right, cool. Let's talk about it. We can do that. But if they're dishonest with you as the lender and all of a sudden, for whatever reason, let's say it's not you, and you're a lender who assumed they were being honest and you took your time going through things, let's say now we're 3 weeks out from closing, you're just getting to underwriting, well,
A week is normally when it comes up.
things are going to be problematic, and you can fix, certain things rather quickly.
Yeah.
Credit is not a fast thing to fix.
Most
Depending
of the time
on the
it's not.
situation.
Yeah. Most of the time it's not.
So if you had one thing before we wrap up that you wish every veteran knew regarding the home buying experience that doesn't take 12 hours and 3 episodes of a podcast. Okay. What is your one thing you wish they knew that they typically didn't know?
I'll tell you, what about my best advice?
I'll take that as well.
Which kind of goes back to what we talked about a little bit earlier, is that make sure that the people you're working with have the knowledge and experience in working with veterans and the VA home loan. And with that they have your best interests at heart. That's the best experience. That's the best advice I can give you, because I see too many times veterans get taken advantage of. Veterans working with people that don't know, because people that do know will guide you what's best for you. That's the best advice I can give you, because everyone's situation is so different and so unique to that person, their family, what they're trying to accomplish.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, we've got much more.
We got plenty. We can go hours and hours.
For those, because everyone does have unique situations,
Yeah.
and not just personally, but every house and property, quite frankly, is a unique situation
right.
in itself. So, if someone wants to reach you, you're willing to answer questions.
Yes.
How do we get a hold of you?
So they can, I think the easiest thing to do is shoot me an email. So just david@vahousingeducation.com. Right? It's easy.
Mm-hmm.
That's the easiest way to get a hold of me. Shoot me an email. We can set up a call, and then I can walk you through your situation. And just remember, just because you're already in that home buying process, it's never too late to, one, switch lenders. I should do a lot of videos on that. If you're a veteran, it's actually pretty easy. Or if you're at I'm at the 9th hour, we're closing a week away and I'm running into issues, man, I'm here to help. So just reach out. I'll tell you what to do. I'll tell you what the lender needs to do. I'll tell you what your realtor's got to do, what you got to do in the transaction to close, so you can make that happen.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really good. Well, for anyone that wants to reach out to me, obviously, like David said, we're resources for veterans and their family members. Whether you're buying, selling, you can reach me at Mitch@citywhitetitle.com, or Google me.
Google me. This may not be a good thing.
Unfortunately, with a last name like mine, it's not good or bad. It's just, I am that guy. You can't say, no, that's a different Mitch. No.
Look at images.
That is me. But at the end of the day, we'll definitely be back doing more. David, thank you so much for coming out.
Thanks, brother.
And